Good morning, everybody, and welcome to OSHA Lifelong Learning at UCSD. This morning, Kamesh Gupta, who is a OSHA member, will be talking about India from his perspective as someone who grew up there and lived there. And it'll be a brief history, a review of the culture through his eyes. His lecture will be from his lived experience, what he knows. It will survey key milestones in Indian history, going all the way back to 2500 BC. And then up to the time when India gained the freedom from British rule in 1947 and adopted a secular constitution. And he will show us pictures of the beauties of India, tell us all sorts of things about the culture of India. And I'm going to say at this point that this is part of a series that OSHA is having on India. Kamesh is talking today. We've had two other speakers on India. And in the spring, we have a Professor Michael Fisher who Oberlin, and he's going to give his 3 lectures on India. So that's a concentration that's going on at the moment. And I wanted to tell you that Kamesh arrived in the United States when he was 21 years old. He was educated in India as a mechanical engineer, and he came for graduate studies at the University of Engineering in Michigan. He has master's and bachelor. No, I'm reading it wrong. He has an MBA degree and a Master's of Science degree, and is a registered professional engineer. I apologize.
Okay.
Great apology from the dog. I'm sorry. First time that's happened. And he worked for General Motors for 36 years. And after retirement, 6 years ago, he moved to San Diego. And he lives with his son and grandchildren and his son's wife, and is a very active member of OSHA, as active as we can be at this time. With that, I welcome Kamesh.
Thank you, Mavis. That's quite a history I have, apart from India's history. It's a long drive from, or a trajectory from a little town in India to San Diego. It's a beautiful place. So anyways, my description of what I want to show is what I have learned about myself, about India's history, its culture, and in the end, how does it look today and what its big challenges are. Now, this will be a very high level description because we're going to have Dr. Fisher in the winter quarter, okay, in January and February. He'll give 4 lectures, and that's deep dive into the history of India. We're very fortunate to get him. He's world-renowned historian about India. So now, as far as what I'm going to talk about, again, it's the cultures and things. Let's just get into it. And since we have a lot to say here and little time, so let me get into the sharing of the PowerPoint here. Let's get on to into the geography of India. And every culture and civilization is driven by location, and that defines how it develops and interacts with the rest of the world. And India is no exception, except it's more acute definition for driving its culture. Just to highlight, on the north is the Himalayan mountain range that goes across all of India, and it protects it from cold waves up north and the intrusions from the north. And it's also is the water source, the glaciers, and all of that that has defined the Ganges plain that runs here all through India, the fertile valley, and what has attracted a lot of outsiders to come to India, and the wealth that this has generated over a period of time. On the northwest is this one pass, the Khyber Pass from Afghanistan into India. And that's about the only entryway. I'm showing Pakistan as part of India here in this geography. So one of the other rivers of note is the Indus valley that exists here, and we'll come to it. Now, on the other three sides of India is the ocean, and that's just so fortunate in the formation of India that it has that world connection through the oceans, and that enables the migration of the early African aboriginals that came to India, and then other trading opportunities, and eventually the occupation opportunities that happened in India later on. So it's both. Really is very key to the uh, culture and civilization development of India. There is other barriers in the middle of India that has kind of formed two parts of India, and even the ethnic population almost. And the Deccan is the Dravidian, and this north is the Aryan part of Indian population. We'll get into it a little bit more. All right, going on now to what I really want to cover in the presentation is this: India is an ancient civilization, 5,000 years old, and always have been open to the world, both North China and other Arabian continent there, and on the ocean side, and has very open culture from the very start. And then how it evolved has been a very diverse culture, adaptive culture, and a very inclusive culture. And I like to illustrate that as I go, and in the end, a short view of the India today. So let's start with the ancient civilization, this transition we're going to talk about. So the ancient civilization called the Indus Valley civilization, and the river Indus, it's in Pakistan now, but it was part of India. Uh, Around there, this ancient civilization existed from 3300 BC to 2500 BC. In 1929, they did start this excavation in this area, and they found 50 sites all the way along. If I can take my arrow from here to the coast and down up to the north in this Indus Valley. And two key places are Harappa here, and Mohenjo-daro is the other big site they have excavated. And it's an agriculture-based civilization, well-developed cities and towns and interaction between them. And they use pretty good technologies for the time, the mud bricks, and they laid out their compounds very nicely. And these bricks were actually baked bricks, not just mud, and then had even water, baths, and sanitation. But some reason it disappeared around 2500, and they still don't know what it was that caused this. And there is no really clues at this point as to what happened to them. Maybe some kind of a disaster like we're having, or is it's a flood or at the Indus River or something. So if I go next to the, okay, this is the Harappa excavation site, and you can see the geometry things that are played out here in the brick structures and in the houses, and as they dig here and look at the sanitation system, the water supply, and so forth. So this is a pretty sophisticated civilization for a contemporary time. And you see on the right here some of the tablets they have found of baked clay, and you see these some kind of a writing. They haven't been able to decode this writing. There is nothing else that is kind of a parallel, like the Rosetta Stone, that you can decipher some of these languages. So it's kind of not unknown what they're saying here. So anyway, go on from here. The disappearance after the Indus Valley civilization, the new civilization that started in 1700 BC has continued to today. It's one continuous civilization starting from the Vedic era, and the migration of people from north, from supposedly Central Asia. They call themselves Aryans, and Aryan in Sanskrit, and that's their language, means noble people. It doesn't mean some of the bad ways this word has been used. But the origin is still controversial, but they were pastoral people, and they brought language in Sanskrit, which is still currently exist. They and in various forms has formed as the key root language of Indian languages, and it has commonality to some of the Indo-European languages also. And very adaptive. They learned agriculture very soon and kind of prospered in that way. The foundational scriptures of Hindu religion that followed and stays in today is these four books they call Vedas. And they were orally constructed, given, I guess, in some ways to the people, these hymns in Sanskrit that pray and describe the creation. And a lot of, I have copies of these in English and Sanskrit. I know a little bit of Sanskrit. I learned it in high school, and I can read the Sanskrit script, which is the same as the Hindi. But the original first one, Veda, is kind of timed to 1100 BC onward. There were four of them through later on as they developed, and they are the foundational scriptures of India. And they continued the Aryanization of India through, as you can see, from the Indus Valley and then over into the past in southern part of India, but they didn't go all the way down into the southern part, which stayed a little bit of a different culture, but there's a lot of interaction. As you see, the religions and languages are uh, same in a lot of ways, but different in some way. So as this Aryanization continued over a period of 900 to 500 BC, I'm showing here that track of time, there were many states formed in the Indian subcontinent. And these are Aryan state or Hindu states all over on the east side. And they stayed as a state for a long time. They expand their border, change kings, and fight with each other. But it was uh, agriculture advances were implemented. State and city states were formed that exist today. The Delhi area was called Hastinapur. Ayodhya is one of the other area where we had some controversy of the temple and the Taxila University, and then both Gaya on the east side. These are some of the things that were developing. Another was the scriptures we call Upanishads from 800 to 100 BC. And these are commentaries on the Vedas. They bring the writings in the Vedas down to more spiritual level that people can understand, introduce this whole karma the principles you have heard about, transcendental and Vedanta philosophies are in there. So these are, again, form the core of Hindu religion and have influenced a lot of other, even today, a lot of transcendental meditation and a lot of things come from this. And the epics were written or orally created at this time that are just into the core of India, the religion as well as other culture. Ramayana is one of those epics where Lord Rama conquered the evil Ravan king and a story of that. And then there's Mahabharata, the epic war between the evil and the good people, and Lord Krishna helping the side of the good. And we have heard the Krishna word here quite a bit, and his teachings are in this book called Gita, and that's part of Mahabharata also, where he gives advice to his warrior Arjun about why he should fight his brothers and cousins. It's a foundational book. And then it comes down to this period to where the Buddha is born, and he now starts to found his Buddhism religion here. And he was born in eastern part of India, somewhere around in this area, and that's where the some of the artifacts are of the Buddhist kings who built there. Sanchi is one of those. I think we've seen that in the Silk Road presentation. But he was born as a prince, and then he abandoned all of that and then had his awareness under a Bodhi tree around in this area. and it's where the pilgrimage from the Buddhist religions come even today. So that phase then goes into, this is very significant part of Indians' evolution of the culture, 330 to 220 BC. And you see one India here, right? Under one kingdom, one dynasty. And that's very unusual in Indian history that, except for the British and the Mughal for a while. And then, of course, during this period, India for the first time was, and it extended all the way into Afghanistan and some of those areas also. And you can see went down all the way to south under the Maurya Empire. And one of this great king was Ashoka the Great. And he's known for having born Indian, but he converted to Buddhism. And he preached a rule of compassion and tolerance. And what we have found to document is this rock edicts. And you see these red arrows. These are about 20 of these stone carvings, not carvings, but inscription in Pali and Sanskrit and some of the languages. And you can read and translate, and they're all over. If you Google them, you will see what kind of a ruler he was, what he preached. And a lot of these are the Buddhist principles of, doing good, taking care of, as a ruler, of your people, and be fair and allow all the religions to exist. So he was a Buddhist king, but Hindus were the primary people, not converted to Buddhism, many of them, but he built these, they found these 20 pillars also. Okay, that these edicts are actually, some of them are stone and some of them are the pillars, stone pillars that has this carving. Okay, so from this period, of course, all empires up and down, and they kind of disappeared, and then this new empire dynasty was started, and I can lay claim to my connection to it just by name, nothing here personal, come down to me, but the Gupta dynasty, 300 to 500 AD. So now we are moving into the CE era, post-Christian, Christ era, and this was the golden period of India. This was peaceful, prosperity, and respect for the kings and the love of kings expanded. Hinduism became, again, the Buddhism was disappearing from India during this period. So the Sanskrit plays were created, written, and eventually written down. And the well-known poet Kalidasa, he wrote this famous Meghadoot, which is a play in Sanskrit. So way back, they were writing all this literature. And these people ruled by alliance. They were win over a territory and leave the ruler in place doing what he was doing. It just makes sure that they follows the overall, the directions of the governance. So at that time, the mathematics and science are developing, and it's 499 AD. There is this treatise by Aryabhata that talks about geometry and a lot of astronomy and those kind of things at that time. Now, example of the technology of that time is this iron pillar of Delhi. And I'm sure some of you have been to India and probably visited this. And at this side, this pillar here is of solid iron, wrought iron, and they have analyzed this as a high phosphorus content. So it gives it that highlight here is no rust at all over millennia. Now, how many steel things have survived like that? They had the technology in 350 AD to create this, 23 feet high, 16-inch in diameter, and weighing 6 ton. And it was actually moved from another location in 1200 AD to the Delhi location, which is also then becomes the site of the Delhi Muslim kings around that period. And you see some of the structure behind from the Muslim period. Okay, that's kind of lie in ruins right now, but there was a mosque there. And there was a temple there before. So it has a long history, this site. And the inscriptions survive on this lower part of this pillar, and they celebrate this King Chandragupta, and it's in Sanskrit, and there's a translation of it that I can't show you because of time and things. But this is an example of technology, how they casted all this intricate stuff. And there was even an attempt to break it down, but they couldn't at that time in 1200 or afterwards. Okay, so now we come from after the Guptas here, and their kingdom, just like any other, disintegrated into smaller states in India of Buddhist and the Hindu kings or whatever alignment. And you can see these kingdoms that they became in this period, 980 onwards. There was this variety of states of various orientations of religion, Hindu and Buddhist somewhat, but mostly Hindu. And they were in Sindh. There was one in Punjab. You can see Bengal, all the way to the south. Vijayanagara actually stayed there as such for a long time, even after the Mughals came. So anyway, this continuous realignment of these states, but they were rife for invasion from outside, because the people from Arab countries here, they are just, they know about India, they've been there, they, sent people over there. And of course, the Greeks came, and we'll talk about that. Alexander the Great ran through India in 300 BC as he was going east. And he went back and left some kingdoms, and we'll talk about this in a minute. But these kingdoms are individual, fighting with each other, and they can't have an organized groups here formed to fight with the invaders. And many invaders came from the north in this period: Arabs, Turks, Huns, Mongols, Genghis Khan, all of them. And one of them I point out here was really brutal. 17 times he went through India, and he looted the temples, and he murdered the people, the priests and people. For example, at this one time he did this, the Somnath temple, which exists on the east side of this in Gujarat. He came down all the way from there, looted it, went back, $40 million worth of stuff, the guests, in silver and gold, and 50,000 people murdered. So now we have this period in which the invaders are coming, and they're trying to establish their sultanates, which is their kingdom, the Arabic word for the kingdoms. So there's a little start of that you see here at the end of 1000 AD. So now we see, okay, the development of sultanates, and this is the Muslim rulers of various times and various origins in Afghan, Turk, Iran. They come and establish and fight with each other, and have, as you see here, over a period of time, the Delhi Sultanate was one of the bigger one. Altamash was another one in 1120 or 1211. Alauddin and Tughlaq in south of India. So this is the kind of variety of the Muslim kingdoms and sultanates by different people fighting with each other, trying to take over all of India. So here comes all of India now. The Mughals, they overcame all of these sultanates and knitted them into one India in around 1500. And that was done by this Babur and his son Humayun, who were fighting wars here in Iran and Turkey. And they then spread eastwards and invaded this part of India. And they tried a couple times. They finally established in 1500s. And then they ruled over India for 300 years as the Mughal Empire. and the various kings here. Some of them are famous and for various things. Jahangir, and remember the, Taj Mahal was in this period, uh, and Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb was one of the last big ones who was sort of very conservative Muslim king, and that caused all kind of fights and wars with the Indian revolution, if you would, at that time. Okay, so we'll come to that. But right now, one of their big well-known king is Akbar. And Akbar was very benevolent sort of a king and very adapted to various religions. So architecture spread, languages, but they had the Farsi, Iranian language as their language. And of course, they kept the Hindi and the Hindu and all of that also. It was a more inclusive king. But ultimately, this kingdoms and dynasty and empire also start to deteriorate around 1700 with Aurangzeb as being really woken up a lot of the local people, and then they formed their own states, and they would fight with the Mughals and then create their own state, and they eventually even survived to 1800 almost. But then all these local uh, states took over. So this, I think most of you have been there, and this was built in 1645, or 10 years, by Mughal Emperor Jahangir in memory of his queen. And it's marble, it's beautiful architecture, one of the seven wonders of the world. It's one of the showcase for the Mughal Empire, if you would. And now, as the Mughal Empire was deteriorating and the Indian states were coming up, and they had over on northwest the Sikh people on this area. They had the Marathas, Maharashtrian here, and Rajputs were in the Rajasthan. So there's all these Indian kingdoms there, small bit. That time the Europeans are coming in, and that made easy by Vasco da Gama finding the route to India around the Cape. Otherwise, they had a hard time coming through the Arabian Sea. So everyone was showing up and trying to see if they can establish rule over India. Portuguese were one of the first one. They settled in Goa, and they continued until after 1950. And Dutch did that, the French somewhere here. Okay, all of them were trying to get foothold here and forming little, of their little states, their foundational part of their. But East India Company, okay, which you are familiar with, was chartered in 1600 as a trading company. And they decided to come to India in the 1700s, and they established themselves in the West here, and very soon expanded into rest of India and kind of took over control of the country, and the other Europeans were left out then, basically. So going on to now, the British East India, okay, they came, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, going too fast. Oh my God, what I'm doing. Okay, the British East India Company, yeah, that's where I should be. They first got full hold in Bengal, and they had their own, the big, really technology of war with the ships, army, and they had the money. So they occupied this part, basically, on the western part of it. Where is it? Okay, in Bengal, and then also on the eastern coast, or in the eastern coast here, and rest of Indian states were there. As you can see, the Sikhs here, the Rajputs, the Marathas, and then Mysore in the south, Hyderabad. There's a Muslim kingdom there left. And then there was still a little bit of Mughal domain left. So this was the situation when they came here in the early last part of the 18th century. So, and they fought with these individual rulers. They recruited local armies, brutalized the people, killed a lot of people, feared all of that, and they occupied these. Strange. And here's how fast, within less than 100 years, you can see 50, 60 years, they moved into and conquered most of India and established their rule. This company, not even a government, established their rules over all of India. The little parts that remained is the Sikh, which they conquered later on, and some of the Sindh part. Okay. And they had Ceylon at that time, Sri Lanka now, and Burma, and some of those things. They also occupied all of this. So after having done this, the British Raj thought, wow, that's quite a plum here, this East India Company, and they're sharing profits and prosperity with their own stockholders. So they take over in 1850 from the East India Company and declare as their empire, as the colony empire for the British Queen at that time. And there were their strategy to occupy continued, which was minimum risk, just control the local people with and extract the most out of India in terms of resources, raw materials, and sell them the manufactured goods, tax, and anything you can do. And they would develop infrastructure that will enable that. And they would rule through existing kings, 600, 700 of them at that time, of smaller and the bigger kingdoms. Like here, there's a big kingdoms that left by Rajputs, and the British Raj just takes over that and not disturbs the ruling of the country. Another area was the Hyderabad and some of these, but all of this was under their rule. And they extracted resources through support their World War I and World War II. The armies went from here, they recruited these armies and they fought for them in the European sectors, but they always had this, the tension helping them between the rulers in India against each other. And they kept the calm of this place, and it was recognized, help them wherever they were ruling. They were saying, hey, you're safe with us. And that's what continued this occupation through 1947. So there have been always resistance to their rules in India. It's not that the Indians were just sitting there and taking it. The people of India were always resisting in some form. Some were cooperating, obviously. This is, a lot to be gained by being on the side of the rulers, and they had a big bureaucracy established, the British Raj system of clerks and support people. But the seeds of mutiny were there. And 1857, there was a huge sepoy mutiny, and about 100,000 people were killed. This was a big uprising in these areas. And they brutally put it down, made it sure that the people don't, do this too often. And then when the people started coming back from these world wars and they were exposed to the outside world, the feeling of freedom and organizing for it started in early 1900s. And that's where the Indian National Congress was formed as a party to kind of rule towards that. Muslim League was there. And also the Indian elites were being exposed into the Nehru and so forth by education in Cambridge and Oxford and some of those places. And Gandhi was educated in England, and then he went to South Africa. From there came in 1918 or so to India, back to lead India to freedom also. So, but around 1935, they had a Home Rule Act, and they did elections between the Muslim League, Indian National Congress, and see if they can do home rules. and that's shown as the territories that Indian National Congress kind of won at that time, and some other parties won small things. These didn't participate. Some of these kings didn't participate, and the dark blue areas are the Muslim League. The concentration of the Muslim people was in these areas, so they won some of those seats. So there's a start of a home rule, but really you want freedom. And that's India-wide resistance, the satyagraha, the nonviolent agitation that Mahatma Gandhi called. So basically, it's all of that force that told them after World War II that really you can't continue here, and that ended in 1947. Now, this is one of the key slides that interfaces between the British Raj, and they suddenly give it to, after partition here, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And it's important to come to the free India. So they decided that they will divide, and they lots of arguments over between Muslim League and Indian National Congress, Nehru and Jinnah, and the Churchill. He was directing it, and they favored a partition. They didn't want a big India, and of course the push was there from the parties, and so they decided to divide India and the west part, and West Pakistan and East Pakistan, and the rest of India. So as a result of that, in 1947, there was migration on the religious basis from the western part of India into here, the Hindus, and the Muslim part go into there. And millions of people got killed in this process because it became really a lot of hate based on the religions. And there were 10 to 12 million refugees who came from here, kind of gathered in this area. And my little town, at least 20–30% of the people were Muslim who moved out. And then the refugees came and they took over the houses and stuff. And so I lived it. Um, in terms of what happened as the result of the migration. And these guys have flourished in India. These refugees are today very good prospects and so forth. So this, as they left India, there were 650 rulers. There was no cohesive India. They gave it to the Indian government that was taking over through, Indian National Congress. And so they had to work with each of these rulers in these states, 650 of them, and decide how much amount of money you need to give to have them signed to come to India as a government. Each one had to decide that. So they got money and estates and properties, and in exchange they turned over to India and signed off to India. Now, two places stood out of here. One is this Hyderabad. There's a Nizam, there's a Muslim ruler, and it's a mix of Hindu and Muslims in this state. So they decided they want to be independent state. Well, after the negotiations failed, they then said, we are, okay, we're going to have to take a police action. And they did, and they got the Nizam out of it and became part of India today, the Hyderabad that you have heard of. So this is one was resolved and settled. The one on north, you have heard from Dr. Nadkarni what happened there. The Hindu king signed off into India, but the population was like 80-20, 80% Muslim, 20% Hindu. And so majority was Muslim, and the Pakistan felt they can invade it, and they did. They invaded this part of India in 1947. And then as India discovered that, and they stopped them, and somewhere around here, there's a line of control over Kashmir, and the arguments came to UN. I remember that. And it continues today. And you heard from Dr. Nadkarni, where is the issues here. The Pakistan holds on to the part they have, and then India has kind of changed some rules there. And then China's intrusions are continuing in this area also, and that's another problem. Okay, now finally, the India's secular constitution in 1950. Beautiful. So now I like to talk about, okay, I'm done with the history part. I hope how much time I have. Okay, it's taking a little more time than I would want, but let's go through it. The world engagement part, how open they have been over the period of time is what I want to talk about now. So here is the first one I want to talk about is their engagement with Iran. All from the BC time, the cultures have been intertwined. And I was myself surprised too, as I delved a little bit deeper, how close it is. The languages are, have common roots. Art and culture is there. The religion, some practices are similar between Iran and Indians' Hindu religion. Zoroastrian was the religion in Iran before the Muslim came over and converted and took over. And at that time, around 700 AD, a bunch of these people moved to India and settled in like the western part. And then all this relationship was stopped when the British came. There was no more openness to Iran. The Greek is another part of Indians' outward movement. Their cultures, trading, and their ideas are very similar. The philosophy of Hinduism, and there was these Institute of Learning in Taxila and Alexandria in the Greek part, and mathematics and science ideas are exchanged here, and also there was this leftover from the Alexander the Great, the Indo-Greek kingdom in the 180 BC to 20 AD. These kingdoms lasted, and they were then taken over by the Hindu kings partly, and became part of the Northwest kingdoms also. So the idol worship kind of came from there. It wasn't into India until the Greeks exchanged this into Buddhism and then into Hinduism. So, okay, also there's have been a great influence in the Southeast Asia, not militarily, but by the exchange of the missionaries into all of these states, all of these countries, and they traded monks, missionaries, and they adopted the Hindu religion versions and the Buddhist version, combined them and made it their own culture and their own religions. But a lot of these roots show in Thailand, the paintings of Rama and all of those things, and their festivals are similar. And interestingly, a lot of people are familiar with Cambodia's Khmer people. Their Angkor Wat's the Hindu temple, and some of the Buddhist temple, but it's a Hindu temple. So there was Hindu kings there, and same in Vietnam. And this was a Champa Hindu kingdom there in 800 AD. So it just shows they have been very much into the world, in and out. Also, now I want to talk about the cultural aspects of it, as how they have had this diverse, adaptive, inclusive culture that is even today, has always been there. So examples of that through people, religions, languages, and I'll talk about very quickly each of these areas is how it is really diverse and very full of life, color, and all of those. So people, there's two ethnic groups in India, and through genes and other verification and so forth. One is a major group is the Indo-Aryan that came from north, okay, and then they went down to India, and then that's 72% of the population. Well, of course, the Adivasi, at the time of in the 50,000 to 30,000, there was these original people that still are there, but they kind of call the forest people, and there's very few of them now. They kind of mixed in, and a small population still exists, but mostly it's the Indo-Aryans and the Dravidians that form India. I mean, they're one kind of mix up gene. Most Dravidians here in the south, and northeast is more Indo-Americans. And but there's a lot of differences on religion, caste, And we can talk in Q&A a little more about that, languages and religion. The next thing I want to show is the religions. In the Hinduism, Hindus are 79.8 or almost 80%. Buddhists almost disappeared out of India, very small population. And Jains was also another religion founded in India, very small community. Sikhs religion was founded in India in the 1520 as a variation of the Hindu religion, and they have their gurus, and then their whole uh, religion is a little bit different and is very unique and integrated. The Muslims and Christians started to interact with missionaries a lot early, and now there is 14% Muslim. If you don't see the number, that's 14 there. The Christians at 2.3%, Sikhs at 1.79%, and the rest in smaller numbers. So it's diverse amount of religions, and they live together. Languages are different. There are two key root languages in India. One is Sanskrit, and the other is the Dravidian. And then there are the derived language. From Sanskrit, there's 14 languages, and there's yellow part here. And there are variations in scripts a little bit and in words. And so they have derived languages from Hindi, like Gujarati in this area. There's Bengali in the Bengal area, and then variation in Marathi in this part of India. And, oh, sorry, get back to this. And then there is the Dravidians in this part of India, which is 8 languages at least are derived from that. And I can't understand any of these 8. Some understanding of these languages. For me, I speak Hindi and Punjabi from this area. So, but these are very different languages. Their script is different, Tamil, Telugu, and these languages that you probably a lot of IT people are from this area here. Different scripts, literature, but there's no national language in India. Hindi is not a national language. Most, work is done in Hindi of the state. Uh, the federal state, and English and Hindi are more prominent in India. The states, though, do have their own state languages, 1 or 2, so they do declare that. But the languages are different and diverse. Now getting into the art. So some of these cave paintings, and some of you have probably gone and seen them, are from 2nd BC. You can see the colorful nature of these and the art that was there in 2nd BC, and they kept adding to these cave paintings in Ajanta, and then some of these Buddhist temple of Sanchi that I think we saw on the Silk Road presentations, and you can see the stupas and those things from the 3rd BC to 1st BC, depending on the kings who were sponsoring this, who were doing this, who were building. Depends on the sponsorships of the Buddhist religion kings. So, and then we have this famous Ellora temples carved out of one stone on the side of a mountain. And then I've seen this, and it's just an amazing place out of stone. And you can see the big structures here that were carved out, not a separate stone, but out of the same stone. And you have Hindu and Buddhist carvings and shown here on a various ways across here. And I think it's a beautiful place. And then there in November to see this temple, 1200 AD temple dedicated to a female deity, which is uncommon in India. Again, the gods are more men, but this particular temple is dedicated to deity Parvati. And it's beautiful temple on a side, all kind of carvings, and the inside also beautiful. Then some of the recent ones, there's the Sikh Golden Temple I also saw last November. I was in India. And, this is the holy place for the Sikh religion, founded in 1589, this temple. And then as through the Sikh kings, they put golden leaves over the domes and a lot of part of the top there. So it's truly a golden temple. On the right is some of the recent temples. There have been all temples everywhere in India, and of course all kind of mosques also, and the Christian churches, and a lot of religions are represented in the architecture. I can't show you all of that. Now, I just want to get into some of these fun part, which is the famous festivals of India. India is the land of festival. Every day there's something to celebrate, depending on religion and also the political, the holidays. But I just want to show that one of these big ones that we have is around this time of the year. And this is one that before Diwali, which is the big fireworks kind of a, the lamps and lighting, that they burn the effigy of the evil king, Ravan. Every town in the north and east does these kind of things. The burn, have a lot of fun around this, and they burn these effigies of the evil king and his brothers. And then you have this big Diwali functions that represents, lamps and the lighting to celebrate the coming back of Lord Rama from having being victorious over the evil king. And you can see this is celebrated all over India. It's a pretty uniform holiday. You see sweets, you see fancy dresses, and lots of, and it's coming up November 15th here, so we'll celebrate. And some of this, and the temples here, these festivals are regional. And here you see Lord Ganesh being carried over to be dispersed in a body of water, which is near to these people, depends on where you are, where you disperse it. And it's celebrated more on the eastern part of India. And then there is this northern part of India holiday called Festival of Color. I just enjoyed this every year around in March, March, I think. They people just throw colors at each other. There's powder colors, there's pump watercolors and so forth, and have fun. Other festival, one of these big festivals happens every 12 years, massive festival. 30 million people attended this one day in 2013, and over 12 days, 60 million people gathered. Huge religious holiday for the Hindus to take a dip in the river Ganges there. So it's at the where three rivers meet. Uh, Ganges and Yamuna and Saraswati, which is underground, they say. But since 8th century, they have been holding this, and it's very big, and a lot of people come to see this humongous gathering of people and how you people manage. They're doing pretty well to manage the camps and the site, water, food, everything. It's unimaginable how they can do this. And then some of these other religious festivals. Here's the Eid festival at the Jama Masjid, which is 17th century mosque, the biggest in India. And they're having the Eid celebration. See in Goa, they do the Christmas and the New Year celebrations, and they burn the old man, the last year's old man, they burn it here. And it's kind of a tradition they've carried in Goa, which is mostly Christian. Okay, now the last part of my talk here is kind of in the next 10 minutes, I hope to kind of cover this, is just a very quick look at India today. Okay, India today is a constitutional, it's the largest working democracy of 1.3 billion people. 1950, they adopted the constitution, very secular, gave equal rights to all and voting rights to all. And in some areas, they did help to create a, helping the underserved people and gave them some extra rights. So, and they had a central government parliamentary system similar to British, and then the state have similar system of their electorate select their assemblies and their chief ministers. Yeah, the Prime Minister Modi is there on top of that. There are 29 states in India. You can see these colored various ways, and 5 union territories, pretty similar definition to what we have here. Supreme Court, they have a pretty fair, generally considered to be pretty impartial Supreme Court, independent army, totally they don't get in the politics. Every 5 years they hold elections and have a great voting system, I tell you. We can talk about in question and answer a little more. They really deliver high turnout. They go to the voters, one electorate system through entire India, similar done, and now really electronic adoption of it. And we can talk about this later on. I visited one in one this state. I was there last year. It's quite amazing process they have in place to have that kind of billion people, billion votes. Okay, not billion vote, but 70% of the voting age people are able to vote. Now, just very quickly, it's the fifth largest economy. The big gorilla here, us, 21.4 trillions, 2019 numbers, I think. And India, well, after China and Japan, okay, India is the fifth largest at almost 3 trillion and have been growing at a pretty high rate, except now with the corona and have slowed down in 2019. So we'll see how do they do it. Uh, and now just some key stats. Who asked, I'm very curious about some of this. We talked about the 1.3 billion growing at 1.1%. One key thing I think is very interesting about India, there's more male than female, 1.1 to 1. So that causes some problems. Urban, 35%, mostly still agricultural, non-urban. Literacy has gone up once into 74%, which is a high achievement. They continue to make inroads into it. Languages, English, highest English speaking population in the world is in India. Okay, surprising a little bit, but digital age, yeah, they are adapting to it. And one of the very impressive thing they've done over the last 10 years or so is bring in this universal identity card. You can't do anything in India without having your Aadhaar card, a card that's digital and has your pupil to confirm the information. You can't open an account, you can make a transaction of your house, and they have 1 billion of these, 1.2 billions have been issued for each young people, newborns. And it's like it's a social security card, except it's an identity card to do transaction. Everyone will have it. Mobile phone, they're taken on to that, really internalize that high rate of internet users. So they're really well into the digital age. Okay, India today challenges, and very quickly, let me just, I have a few minutes, 5 minutes. Identity crisis is looming there, just like it is here in way of nationalistic shift to that. And it's who is Indian, how much Indian you are or not is kind of raging there. And I think we were gonna have a lecture on one of those citizenship questions. We can talk about that in the Q&A. But there is that little bit of that spreading around the world of what we have here, and a lot of nationalistic issues are being taken on or discussed. Inequality, India is, land of inequality, just as diversity in terms of class, caste, and we will talk in Q&A of caste and jati. They're kind of combined. And tribal issues and economic divide is pretty wide, highly wide there. Inequality exists, really poor people to really rich people. Governance, okay, there's corruption at all levels, except maybe not at the highest level with Modi, but rest of they're trying to fight that, but it exists in a lot of bureaucracies and so forth. Transparency is a problem. And right now, my wish is that they'll have viable two parties. The old party of Indian National Congress is kind of reduced in numbers and following. Modi's party is more prominent, but it'll be good to have good equal two parties there in India. And then there's the issue of the hostile neighbor there. Pakistan continues to have issues with India. India and Pakistan both have issues. And then China recently have been being aggressive on the northwest corner there. So as you saw near Tibet area. up way high in the mountains. Poverty is a big issue. Job growth is a young population in India primarily, more so than other countries. And jobs are an issue and will be for a while. One issue I wanted to highlight, being the OSHA audience here and myself interested in climate change, India contributes about 7% here of the carbon pollution compared to obviously United States, and now China is the biggest one, and then other small countries, Europe countries, and so forth. But the impact on China, on India, is very high of climate change because we contribute nothing and it still will be impacted. They, because of their geography, again, the coastal regions and flat regions and the delta regions will see the water rise in the sea levels really impact on population and destruction it will bring. Rise in temperatures is already impacting there in the, and the glaciers are melting up in Himalayas, and water supplies are being impacted, will be impacted. The river system that they depend on will be impacted. Rains and monsoons that come there in June, July supply most of the water. Uh, Replenishment, it's already being very erratic timing and high, sometimes low, and then the droughts become extreme, already showing up. So all of these are gonna just, India being a dense population in the coastal and all the, dependence on the Himalayan glaciers for water, the climate change is going to impact this country much more than other countries. Inequality will increase, food security will get worse, and climate migrants will be created. As you saw, the areas in Bengal and the areas in Bangladesh now, which was the East Pakistan, they are very low lying, and there's been a lot of migration into India from Myanmar and from the Burma and the Bangladesh population moving into India in the eastern part, northeastern part, and it'll increase because of the climate and a lot of other reasons. Now, India is doing the mitigation part pretty well, and they are signatory to the Paris Agreement. They have a commitment to do fossil fuels removal, okay, of non-fossil fuels of 65% on renewable energy and go away from coal. They're coal dependent now, and they're expanding in wind and solar and other technology, hydro. Uh, and they have a target by 2030 to be 65% renewable. That's pretty high. EV also, they're trying to promote that. That's their big issue because they had to import a lot of oil. And of course, there's the climate change issue. So I think I have covered some of these things I wanted to, and civilization, openness to world, diverse culture, lots of achievement, a lot of challenge in India. And we come to the Q&A part.